The air inside the grand ballroom of the New York Marriott Marquis was alive with anticipation as faces glowed under chandeliers and sharp stage lights, while hundreds gathered for the Education Reform Summit hoping to tackle disparities. In America's schools, at the center stood Representative Alexandria Ocasio, her navy blazer crisp, her voice ringing with conviction as she spoke about how education should be the foundation of opportunity, her hands slicing the air, drawing nods and murmurs of agreement when she declared that too many kids, especially in underserved communities, still had promises unfulfilled. The crowd erupted. Teachers clapped their lanyards, swinging students in the back, held signs that read "Fund Our Future." Cameras zoomed in on AOC's intense gaze as she seemed to pull each listener into her mission. The room felt united until from the press area, Senator John Kennedy emerged in his rumpled suit and easy Louisiana smile, startling the audience like a sudden chord in A. Quiet song whispers spread, heads turned, phones lifted. AOC paused mid-sentence, her brow tightening as Kennedy raised a hand in a casual wave, then began his deep, folksy drawl that cut through the room's hum, saying he couldn't help but overhear her passion for equity and wondered if he might add a word or two, his tone playful. But his eyes, sharp, the audience shifted, some chuckling, others disapproving, as a young woman whispered who led him in while. A man leaned forward, intrigued. AOC's expression hardened. She gripped the podium, her knuckles whitening before she replied that this was a forum for solutions, not surprises. And he was not on the program. Her supporters near the stage clapped in defiance. But Kennedy didn't flinch. He took a step forward, hands clasped like a preacher, saying he didn't mean to ruffle feathers, but thought folks deserved all sides of the story. The question hung in the air. A few nodded, others shook their heads. Attention was tight as a wire. AOC's voice cut through, telling him to sign up like everyone else. This isn't free. For applause broke out, especially from teachers waving AOC for equity signs. But man stood up calling, "Let him speak," drowned out by another shouting, "No stick to program." The room teetered on KOC signal security. Two guards moved toward Kennedy, who seemed amused as he raised his hands, not surrendering, but pausing the moment, saying he wasn't here to cause a scene, just wanted 1 minute to talk about the kids were all here. For his warm, steady voice silenced the room. Some clapped. A man in a baseball cap yelled, "Give him a chance," while a young activist stood shouting, "This is AOC's event. Get him out." The guards hesitated, looking at AOC, who weighed her options. Refusing him outright might seem closed off. So after a tense breath, she nodded, icy but firm, telling him 1 minute. "Make it count. Don't waste our time." The crowd exhaled, phones recording. Kennedy nodded, thanks, his gray hair catching the lights as he stood in the aisle, not the stage, but the room was his thanking AOC. He promised not to overstay, then launched into a story about growing up in a small town where school was everything. Teachers cared, neighbors looked out for each other. Every kid deserved that chance. He said no matter where they came from. His words simple but striking. An older woman nodded, hands clasped. A college student whispered, "He's good." Kennedy's tone deep in saying they were all here to make schools better, but wouldn't get there by shutting each other out, asking for a seat at the table, glancing at AOC, then sweeping the crowd. Applause started slow, then spread. Even skeptics couldn't deny his potency. Watching knew Kennedy's minute was a calculated performance to win hearts. She'd have to work to reclaim the room. A young teacher clapped for Kennedy, then caught herself glancing sheepishly at AOC. The applause built. A man near the aisle called, "Let's talk," while another yelled, "AOC, keep going." The ballroom was now a mosaic of opinions. Kennedy savoring the moment. The guards unsure what to do. Reporters typing furiously, sure they had a viral story. AOC returned to the mic, her voice calm but edged, thanking Kennedy, then pivoting sharply, saying they were here for real solutions, funding, access, equity, not just words. The supporters clapped, but the crowd was buzzing. Kennedy's presence had shifted everything. The ballroom that moments ago felt united now crackled with debate. Kennedy stood, hands in pockets, a quiet challenge to AOC's command. As everyone there and countless watching through phone screens knew, they were witnessing something unforgettable. The next moments would shape the summit's entire narrative. As Kennedy, sensing the crowd's pulse, didn't rush to speak again, instead letting the applause fade, his hands resting in his pockets, his posture relaxed, but intentional. Then with a slight tilt of his head, he began, his voice carrying that same southern cadence that had already softened part of the room, saying, "Representative, I'm grateful for that minute," nodding toward AOC with a sincerity that felt almost disarming. "And I don't plan to overstay my welcome, but let me tell you a quick story." The crowd leaned in, some drawn by curiosity, others by skepticism. A young man in a hoodie near the back whispered his friend, "This guy's got guts." Kennedy continued, his tone warm, like he was sharing an old memory over coffee. "Back in my hometown, we had a little schoolhouse, nothing fancy. One teacher, Miss Clara, taught us all, rich, poor, Didn't matter, she'd say. You don't learn by talking over each other, you learn by listening. That stuck with me. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room, locking with a teacher in the front row. Then a student in the back. We're here to fix schools. Right, well, I think Miss Clara would say we start by giving each other a chance to be heard. His words, simple yet sharp, landed like a well-aimed dart. Applause broke out louder than before, spreading from the center too. The edges of a middle-aged woman in a cardigan stood clapping with a bright smile, while a group of college students who had come to support AOC exchanged glances, one muttering, "He's kind of making sense." Even some of AOC's supporters, though hesitant, couldn't help but nod. Kennedy's story was more than just a story. It was a bridge linking his small-town roots to an urban crowd, making the value of listening feel universal. Cameras caught every moment, zooming in on his weathered face, his twinkling eyes, the crowd's shifting mood. A local reporter typed furiously on her laptop, her screen flashing a draft headline, "Kennedy wins hearts at Education Summit." OC, still at the podium, felt the room leaning toward him. Her hands rested lightly on the edge of the podium, but her mind raced. She had seen charismatic politicians before, but Kennedy's ability to turn a near ejection into a moment of human connection was something else. She stepped close to the mic, her voice calm yet firm, slicing through the fading applause. "Senator stories are nice," she said, her tone measured but edged, "but the kids in underfunded schools need more than anecdotes. They need funding, resources, real change, not just a seat at the table, but a system that actually works for them." Her words drew a wave of applause, especially from her core supporters near the stage, waving signs that read equity. Now a young teacher in glasses jumped up shouting, "That's right." OC, the room began splitting again. One side pulled by Kennedy's charm, the other rallying behind AOC's call for serious action. The security guards, still near the aisle, exchanged wary glances, not sure if they'd be needed again. Kennedy, unfazed, tilted his head, like weighing OC's words, then chuckled softly, a sound that traveled through the speakers and drew a few laughs. "Representative, you're right. Kids need more than stories," he said, his voice steady but warm. "But let me tell you, I've met folks across this country, teachers working 2 jobs, parents scraping by, who just want to know someone's listening. They don't care about who's got the loudest mic. They want a conversation." He spread his hands, as if inviting the whole room to join. "I'm not here to fight you, Representative. I'm here to say let's really talk about what our schools need." The crowd erupted again, this applause bigger and wider than before now, even reaching some who had been firmly on the fence. A man in a denim jacket near the back stood up, his voice booming. "He's got a point. Let's talk." A woman in a business suit nodded, whispering to her colleague. I didn't expect to agree with him. The shift was undeniable. Kennedy's charisma was like a tide, pulling even the skeptics closer. His stories, rooted in small-town simplicity, somehow resonating deeply in a room packed with urban educators and activists. A group of high school students holding signs for AOC began whispering, one saying, "I mean, he's not wrong about listening." Cameras captured all the crowd's conflicted reactions. Kennedy's easy confidence, AOC's controlled intensity. A reporter texted her editor, "Kennedy's stealing the show," while across the room phones uploaded clips of the speech. A 30-second video by an account called NYC Truth Teller showed Kennedy's Miss Clara's story with a caption, "Senator Kennedy just dropped a truth bomb at AOC Summit." Within minutes, it racked up thousands of views, comments flooding and calling him real, saying AOC got outplayed, even Democrats writing, "He's got me thinking." OC, sensing the crowd's drift, stepped forward, her voice rising with resolve. "Senator, I hear you on listening," she said, locking eyes with him. "But let's be clear, the system isn't broken because people aren't talking. It's broken because resources aren't reaching the kids who need them most. Black, brown, low-income communities left behind for decades." Her words were like a spark, reigniting her supporters. A group near the stage stood clapping fiercely, one shouting, "Tell her." See, the applause was strong, but couldn't quite drown out murmurs of Kennedy's name from the back. OC continued, her tone unwavering. "We're not here to swap stories. We're here to demand accountability, to push for policies that close the gap. That's what these kids deserve." Her supporters roared, and for a heartbeat she reclaimed the room's energy, her passion cutting through Kennedy's calm like a blade. But Kennedy wasn't finished. He took a small step forward, still keeping his distance from the stage, his smile subtle but sure. "Representative, I don't disagree," he said, his voice low yet clear, picked up by a mic. "Those kids deserve everything we can give, but I've learned something from years of listening. Change starts when we stop shouting and start sharing. I'm not your opponent here. I'm asking for a chance to work together." The crowd erupted with another wave of applause, this time even broader, including some who just clapped for AOC. A retired principal in the third row stood calling, "He's right. Let's find common ground." The room became a swirl of cheers and counter-cheers chants of OC mixing with shouts for Kennedy. The security guards, now little more than spectators, stood back, their role dwarfed by the drama. Social media exploded. The NYC Truth Teller clip hit 20,000 views, comments poured in calling Kennedy a legend, saying AOC's still the queen. Another video posted by a student showed Kennedy's "Let's Talk" line with text, "When you crash a summit," and when the crowd, the hashtag Kennedy at AOC Summit, began trending. News outlets were already drafting stories. A local reporter whispered, "This is bigger than the summit itself." Inside the ballroom, Kennedy still in the aisle, his understated presence, somehow commanding, had turned that narrow space into his own platform. AOC, though, was far from finished gripping the podium, her eyes scanning the crowd, hunting for a way to pull the focus back. She knew Kennedy's folksy charm was a challenge, but she also knew her own power, her ability to speak hard truths, to rally those who believed in her vision. As applause for Kennedy began to fade, AOC leaned into the mic, her voice steady, charged with purpose. "Senator, I appreciate your call for conversation." She said, her words deliberate, "But let's not confuse talking with doing. These kids need us to act now." Her supporters exploded with cheers, reminding everyone of her grip on the room. Even in Kennedy's unexpected rise, the crowd stood divided, a living portrait of a split nation. And the summit, meant to be a focused debate on education, had become something else entirely, a stage for two visions of leadership. Kennedy, with his gentle stories, had turned a near ejection into a moment of connection, while AOC, with her unrelenting focus, fought to keep the fight for equity front and center. The ballroom, alive with tension and possibility, waited to see what would come next. The next moments would shape the summit's entire narrative, as Kennedy, sensing the crowd's pulse, didn't rush to speak again. Instead, letting the applause fade, his hands resting in his pockets, his posture relaxed, but intentional. Then, with a slight tilt of his head, he began, his voice carrying that same southern cadence that had already softened part of the room, saying, "Representative, I'm grateful for that minute," nodding toward AOC with sincerity that felt almost disarming. "And I don't plan to overstay my welcome, but let me tell you a quick story." The crowd leaned in, some drawn by curiosity, others by skepticism. A young man in a hoodie near the back whispered his friend, "This guy's Gakut's Kennedy," continued, his tone warm, like he was sharing an old memory. "Over coffee back in my hometown, we had a little schoolhouse, nothing fancy. One teacher, Miss Clara, taught us all rich poor. Didn't matter, she'd say. You don't learn by talking over each other, you learn by listening." That stuck with me. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room, locking with a teacher in the front row. Then a student in the back. "We're here, the fixed schools, right? Well, I think Miss Clara would say, we start by giving each other a chance to be heard." His words, simple yet sharp, landed like a well-aimed dart. Applause broke out louder than before, spreading from the center to the edges. A middle-aged woman in a cardigan stood clapping with a bright smile, while a group of college students who had come to support AOC exchanged glances, one muttering, "He's kind of making sense." Even some of AOC's supporters, though hesitant, couldn't help but nod. Kennedy's story was more than just a story. It was a bridge linking his small-town roots to an urban crowd, making the value of listening feel universal. Cameras caught every moment, zooming in on his weathered face, his twinkling eyes, the crowd's shifting mood. A local reporter typed furiously on her laptop, her screen flashing a draft headline, "Kennedy wins hearts at Education Summit." AOC, still at the podium, felt the room leaning toward him, her hands rested lightly